Director Pedró.
Thank you very much, Sara, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone attending this presentation. I would like to start by saying that for some people, talking about what happens to women in higher education may sound a bit out of this world, because we are all convinced that the beginning starts with what happens in the family, what gender roles families contribute to generate, and then it continues into school. So at the age of 18, when people, both men and women, arrive to higher education institutions, most of the work has already been done, unfortunately. So many people will wonder why we are devoting so much effort to talk about higher education in this particular case. And I think that we have probably two powerful reasons. One is that we have good news, and the other one is that we still have very bad news. When it comes to good news, I would like to stress something that you will find in our joint report, is that we have made impressive progress over the past years in terms of both access and graduation rates. Increasingly, I tend to believe that this century is going to be the century of women in higher education. I mean, the work hasn't been completed yet, but I think that the progress rates, as the report shows, are really impressive. So we have very good news to be shared, and that's a powerful reason. But we still have very bad news. And I think that not much progress has been done when it comes to at least three important areas. The first one is, I would say globally, power and authority. It is still very difficult for women, and you will see that in the report as well, to get access to the upper categories of the professoriate, not only in the countries examined here, but everywhere in the world. The same applies to senior management positions also in universities. And I have to say that this shows clearly that the power and the authorities are still in the hands of male colleagues. The second area of bad news is that the entrance in the labor market also signals the expectations of, well, I would say different expectations when it comes to salaries. And we have to realize that the same university graduates, depending on their gender, are going to get higher or lower salaries. It's still a problem in which universities have a lot to do. And finally, I would say, and this is the most worrisome issue, we still have many episodes of all kinds of harassment in or within our institutions. Some of them are very hard, very, I would say, very strong, very heavy, and easy to detect. However, the most important ones, probably the ones that are harming more and more women, are those kinds of soft harassment. And I think that our institute has a commitment also with the regional offices to promote guidance when it comes to how to deal with harassment. That's how far I wanted to go. I think that this report is really an indication of how well an institute and one of the most important, if not the most important regional office can work together following the two most important UNESCO priorities, Africa, of course, and gender as well. It is also important for the institute because it's a way of demonstrating that the institutes, not only ours, but all institutes, are here to serve first and foremost the needs of regional and local offices. And I think that we have enjoyed so much this cooperation that I think it's not the end today, it's rather the beginning of something that we are going to do over the time. I think that it is also important for you to realize that in a couple of hours or so, we are going to launch, jointly with the Times Higher Education, another report on how global universities are performing when it comes to gender equality. We draw on a wealth of data to examine whether higher education is setting a leading example for other sectors, as it happens to be the case. But it is important to realize that one of the key findings is that while most, I would say, global research universities claim to have various policies and services that support women's progress and advancement. As a matter of fact, only a few are able to provide relevant evidence, which in fact raises the question about the real progress, not only in discourse, but in actual practices. Unfortunately, if you look at the top 200 universities in the world, including some research-oriented African universities, not more than 20%, as a matter of fact, of them have women in the most important positions, be that as a dean or as a rector of the university. So, I mean, today we're talking about Africa, certainly, but this is still a global issue. Now, let me finalize by expressing my gratitude to Director Hubert Gijzen for the capacity of his team to work together with us, for the commitment to these two priorities, certainly, but also for providing us really a nice environment for cooperation. I think that the team of the regional office, led by Saidou, has been outperforming any expectations. So congratulations to them, and congratulations overall for this nice spirit of cooperation that they have showed all over the process. We'll see what we are going to be together for next year, and maybe for other priorities as well. And let me finalize by thanking once more our team at the Institute, led by Professor Daniele Vieira, who used to be one of the most important senior analysts at the Institute and is now in a well-positioned university. I hope that not only writing about gender inequalities in higher education, but also transforming the landscape of Brazilian universities. Thank you to her and to the team as well. And back to you, Sara. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your welcoming words, Director. I would like to pass now to my colleague, Schéhérazade Feddal, who will continue in this dialogue, in this dialogue with me during this session. So over to you, Schéhérazade.
Yes, thank you very much, Sara. Thank you very much, Director Francesco Pedró from IESALC. So now we're very honored to have Professor Hubert Gijzen, the Regional Director for Eastern Africa, based in Nairobi, for his welcome remarks. Professor Hubert, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Schéhérazade. Dear colleagues and friends, a very good afternoon or morning in Caracas, and greetings from the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa. Let me first of all start by wishing you all a most happy International Women's Day. And yes, I would say to all, indeed, it's not just for women. This day is for both men and women, for boys and girls, and we should use that to reflect on the position of women in all sectors, and also to be inspired. We all know some examples of strong women who are leading in some institutions. Take, for instance, UNESCO, which has also a woman in the cockpit. Now, this year's theme, I wanted to remind of that because I find it really a very strong title. The theme is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. So it emphasizes really that gender equality is not just a dream or a target or an aim, but it is an objective of where we have a common interest. So I'm pleased with the timing of this pre-launch, that it happens on the International Day for Women, and that we are looking now at the pre-launch of the studies done for Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda. And I hope that later on we will be able to look at some other countries. For instance, I've proposed that we look at Rwanda basically Rwanda is developing as a role model when it comes to gender equality. It is I think the only government that has really a 50% parity in cabinet and also in parliament. So that is really telling, and the Rwanda government has a very proactive policy towards gender equality. So I'm very interested to hear about the results of the assessments of the situation and also on the proposed way forward. I will unfortunately not be able to stay. I have to run to another event, but I will definitely have a look at the reports and especially interested in the way forward. The reflection on the position of women in tertiary and higher education is absolutely essential. It's crucial because like in many other sectors, women are simply underrepresented, and Francesc shared some figures already. But just in terms of the general picture, did you know that 95% of the Fortune 500 CEOs are men? 95%. And 2/3 of the almost 800 million adults without basic literacy skills are women. Also, we all travel a lot. Interesting statistic. In 95% of all the flights, the announcement is your captain speaking is made by a man. Very rarely you hear a woman in the cockpit. And I would say the world of tertiary and higher education is no different. If you look in Africa, there are currently some 14 million students enrolled in tertiary and higher education. That is only 6.4% of the global enrollment. And that is low if you compare this with the world population, where Africa hosts 15% of the world population. So it is less than half of what one would expect based on the population, and in fact far less than half because we have also this enormous high percent of youth in the continent. So Africa is lagging behind there significantly. And then I'm particularly concerned about the sciences. So the general participation of students, the enrollment in sciences is low. Only 1/3 of students in Africa are enrolled in science fields. And then the participation of that already low percent, the participation of women, which is even lower. The latest UNESCO science report indicates that only 1 out of every 3 researchers globally is a woman, and that's global, but that's also the case in Africa. So I'm particularly worried by the low women participation in science, as I said, but especially if you look now at new emerging contemporary science fields like nanotech, biotech, artificial intelligence. If you look at artificial intelligence today, and that is a global figure, only 22% of professionals working in this domain are women. So that is particularly low. And this means we are grossly underutilizing the world's, and in this case, Africa's human resource capacity, but also its intellectual potential. And strengthening women engagement in science in particular is, I would say, a low-hanging fruit to also boost the science capacities, the much needed science capacity in the continent. And I would make one very strong argument in favor of gender parity. There are a number of studies that have been published. They show that gender balanced teams are more productive, and in companies, they are more profitable. So what is keeping us from making sure that teams are gender balanced? Now, interestingly, if you look at the intake in universities, overall, it looks okay. but there is a major difference, and I gave some figures already on the STEM areas, so the science, technologies, engineering, and the humanities. Now that's overall the case, also for boys, but in terms of the gender parity, you see that especially in the engineering and the science and technology areas, you see the imbalance. Then if you look at the spectrum of education, there is also a very dangerous trend. And in the UNESCO science report that is presented with the term, the leaking pipe. So what is the leaking pipe? We tend to lose women while they move on in their progression in the education and the higher education studies. So at BSc level, the graduates, if you look at that, 53% are women. The MSc level, that's more or less the same still. But then they progress to PhD, and now suddenly you see a drop. It goes down to 43% only. And then post-PhD, so postdocs, researchers, the participation of women further drops to only 28%. So I think this is important because we need to look at these figures. It doesn't mean we need to have more women at the undergraduate or MSc level. Women are actually in the majority. We need to understand why we lose them when they further progress towards PhD, postdoc, and the work floor. So if you look at the work floor, we see there's also reflected on the work floor in tertiary and higher education institutions, a low percent of female full professors, and also senior management positions, especially here in Africa. Francesc referred to 20% of senior management positions are held by women in Africa. I would proudly share a figure of the UN and also UNESCO, which has achieved gender parity for senior positions some time ago. So that is at the P5 and director levels. We are 50-50. So that should encourage us. That shows it can be done. And there is work to be done. Now, in order to rebalance the position of women in tertiary and higher education, we must, first of all, understand the reasons behind this. And I hope that the report will pay some attention to that. I would say, from my own perspective, there is probably 3 or 4 reasons that can explain this. First of all, historic. In the old days, it were typically the men who would go for advanced studies. It wasn't meant to be for women. The second is, still today, there is a very strong gender bias and perception that STEM, and especially TVET, is not for women. Now that's ridiculous. We should leave that behind us, and we should work on that in terms of the image for these careers. The career progression is another issue. So we know that women are taking time off to care for children, and that causes a gap in their career. It is also known that women work much more part-time than men. So these are all elements that contribute to what we see. And then what usually in studies is not brought to the fore, there is, of course, the issue of gender-based violence in all forms, which is still a very persistent issue of concern everywhere, also in institutions of higher learning. And we did a study in the UNESCO Regional Office for Southern Africa, a study on gender-based violence in polytechnics in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, in Tanzania, and the results were truly shocking. And in response to that, we designed the O3+ program, which is a broad program now on university students, particularly focusing on female students. It's a broad program on education for health and well-being. So let me stop here. In conclusion, I would say I look forward to our continued cooperation in this very important area. And I wish you again a very happy International Women's Day. Over to you.
Thanks, Professor, for your words. We may now go along with the agenda and to have the pre-launch of the report, Building Sustainable and Equitable Higher Education Systems in Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda, presented by Daniele Vieira, part of the UNESCO IESALC project team and assistant professor at the Universidad Federal de Pernambuco in Brazil, and by Saidou Jallow, senior program specialist at the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa. Welcome, colleagues. The floor is yours. Over to you, Daniele.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you very much. Hello, colleagues. I also would like to greet the participants who have joined us today in this important event. And then I will just share here my presentation. I think it will be easier for us to follow my talk. I would like to please just to confirm that you have seen, that you can see the PPT.
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. So then we are going to present now some data. This event is called a pre-launch. So it's not really the final launch of the document. The final launch will be done in May during the World Higher Education Conference organized by UNESCO. But now, as we are today in the International Women's Day today, of course, we would like to share with you all some preliminary data of these documents. So just to contextualize, here at IESALC, we have done a first study 1 year ago, also prior to the last International Women's Day, where we did a global assessment of the female participation in higher education. So you can see here on the right of the presentation, here on the top, on the bottom right, this is the cover of the previous publication that we did. This was a global study where we had data for women participation in various areas in all the continents. And then what we found out when we did this first assessment is that we have a female advantage in higher education in terms of enrollment. So global female advantage in higher education enrollment is a reality in all the regions apart from sub-Saharan Africa. So you can see it here highlighted in the graphic with this red circle here. And this is the exception that we have to the global data. So in all the regions, we can see that the enrollment of women in higher education has increased more than that for their male colleagues. But in Africa, although we have a very good data, which is from when we compare data from 2000 to 2018, the participation of women in higher education has doubled, but it is still less than their male counterparts. So this is a situation that we would like, that we have decided to analyze a little bit more in detail. What are the reasons for that here? What is the real diagnosis? Why women, why in the African region, particularly we have this data, why in the other regions the women have achieved what we call the female advantage in enrollment. What we also found out in this initial study is that there are some, of course, they are entering more higher education universities, higher education institutions. This is very good, but there are still some limits to this advantage. That's what we call some persisting inequalities. So some of these inequalities include inequalities in STEM, which is what we normally call horizontal gender segregation. So this is also what our Professor Hubert already mentioned. So we have this lack of women participation in various areas in STEM education, in STEM careers. We also see some inequalities in terms of postgraduate degrees. That's what we normally call vertical gender segregation. So the more we go up the ladder in career, in academic careers, and you're going to see some data soon from Kenya, from South Sudan and Uganda. The more we go to upper careers, we will see that less participation of women we will have. So we also found out that, and this is global data, not only related to Africa, this is global data, inequalities also in postgraduate degrees, inequalities in research performance, most of the researchers globally are male, inequalities in the professoriate, this is also a data that caught our attention, and you will see also soon in some of the graphics that we have here, that this is also the case in the countries that we studied in Africa. So we have a good share of women in secondary education, primary education, but when it comes to tertiary education, the majority of the lecturers, senior lecturers, professors, all those positions are occupied by men. We also saw that there are some inequalities in terms of management positions, in leadership positions in general, and also some inequalities in terms of wage. We have the same degree, but the salaries normally are lower. So based on this data, we wanted to do a follow-up study and understand a little bit more the African context. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, the African context is the exception to the data we have found globally. In other regions, women are entering higher education more than men. This is not the case in the African region. So we wanted to understand a little bit more this context. The data that we are going to share now is just some preliminary data. We are still analyzing the data in more detail, but we have some data which is already a good thing for us to understand what is the real situation. So for this first time of the study, we have analyzed 3 countries, and specifically Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda. Professor Hubert already mentioned very good data about Rwanda. I also agree that Rwanda is improving significantly in the region in terms of women participation, and I think it would be good to have Rwanda in a second phase of a project and in another assessment. But for now, we have some data for Kenya, for South Sudan, and for Uganda. So the objectives of this next phase of the project, as I said at the beginning, we had this global assessment. Now we have a more specific regional assessment in Africa. So we want to describe, the idea is to describe the situation of women's participation in higher education. What is the real situation, particularly when it comes to leadership positions. We identify also some areas for persisting gender inequalities. What are those areas? And I can already tell you that leadership, top positions in our areas of university, senior management, deans, senate, all those positions are still highly dominated by men. So we also have identified, I can already tell you that this is a persisting inequality also in the African region, and provide some policy recommendations. We are not going to enter that on this topic for the pre-launch today, as we would like also first just to share with you some preliminary data, not the recommendations at this moment. Some of the questions that we have addressed include the current status of their representation in higher education. What are the competencies, the key competencies considered when they are hired for leadership or governance positions? Those institutions that we have studied in the region, when they hire women for top leadership positions, for governance positions, what are the competencies that they normally take into consideration? We also assess that. The factors that inhibit their participation or their participation in more leadership positions, in top leadership positions, and what are the strategies that we can use to increase the participation of women in higher education. So these were basically, for this first time of the project, the main questions that we addressed, the areas that we wanted to assess in more detail. So let's go more in detail in the country's assessment. I would like to ask my colleague Saidou, and Dr. Saidou, if you would like to join to jump now, or if I can continue, please advise.
Can you hear me, Danielle?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Danielle, for, as agreed, I think you will do the first part of it and I will take over from here and continue the second part. Thank you very much for setting the scene and the context of the global study you did last year, which was launched, the results of which the report was launched on this particular day. And obviously we saw the disparity, the differences in women, not only enrollment, but in participation and etc. With compared to Africa and the other continents. All right. So that's the circle, the red circle you circled on the PowerPoint, where you show the some data on the last study you made. You did on the global dimension. So it is at that point that I think our directors and ourselves were interested in why is it the case in Africa? Why is Africa not the same as the others? Why hasn't enrollment risen to level the boys or to catch up with the other regions of the world? There could be something there. What is it? So then the idea of having a follow-up study of this one, focusing purely in the Eastern Africa region for now, until we get to another level, we will spread it out. But for now, we wanted to look at Eastern Africa, particularly focusing on 3 countries. And these countries already know: Kenya, Uganda, and South Sudan and Uganda. So, okay. So the questions that were highlighted by Daniele are very relevant. These are the questions that are addressed in the different countries. And here we have the Kenya one. And I believe each country will look at what are the factors that are there, what is the environment, the context, where do we start? And Kenya, there is a policy and legal framework, just like the other countries, but I've been dealing with them individually as countries, all right? So there is the constitution in Kenya, the National Policy on Gender and Development of 2019, National Gender Equality Commission Act. There are acts, there are legal frameworks and policies that would support women, gender parity, gender equality, or their or affirmative action. There's the Universities Act, there's a TVET Act of 2013 in Kenya. These are all things that address issues relating to women participation in higher education. So the study looked at diverse areas from the participation of women in higher education positions as we go up from lecturer to senior lecturers to principal lecturers to heads of department, deans, vice chancellors, members of the Senate, etc., etc. This is what is looked at for all the 3 different countries. Beginning with that's right. Beginning with gender diversity academic staff, we can see the blue is the male employees and the female are the brownish, let's say brown. Yeah, you can see the figures there. They are very low. Ladies, women, say for example in Nairobi, there are many universities here. Several of them are involved in the study. All right, but take any one of them, from 22% in Tom University, right through to the highest would be Karantina with close to below 50%, still below 50%, not yet 50%, maybe 47, 47, 46. That's the highest of all, where women are part of the academic staff. All right. Now you go on to the next slide. This gender diversity university professor positions, the professoriate. Again, it's even more severe. The gender imbalance is even more acute. University of Nairobi, for instance, if you look at it, you have 17% who are women and 83% are male professors. All right. Is definitely there's an imbalance there right through. And Romo University has no female at all, for example, or has no female at all in the professor position at that university. The others have a few of them, 24%. University of Eldoret has 24% female. Going on to senior lecturer positions, the next one, again, the picture is the same, the trend is the same. All right. Women are less, have a less chance of being a senior lecturer or a professor than the males, except for one university here, is Lara University has more female senior lecturers. 80% of the staff are female lecturers, senior lecturers. and 20% male. And of course, that counterbalances the one Boma University, which has no female at all. So this imbalance is still there. Let's keep going. Is it true for the other positions? University Council membership, gender diversity University Council membership, for instance, if you look at this picture, this graph on the table, again, shows the same similar picture as before. However, in this one, there's more improvement, there's more increase in the number of women or females in the different university councils. University of Nairobi has very high, 44% are members of the university councils. And of course, Lara University has 50-50. That's parity. That's a lovely situation to see, all right? Go to university management, see similar situation, similar in that there are 1 or 2 places where you have women performing far more than men, all right, as in Bome University. But overall, like the last situation, all right, women are increasing, their participation in university management is also increasing, all right, but still below those of men, except in the case of Bome University, where you have more women, 57%, than men in university management. Okay, the next one, university leadership position. Again, the same story. Again, the same story, where you have far more male, the imbalance is still persistent. It is still persistent. Although there could be improvements in the University of Eldoret, the second set of on the graph, that one you have 40% of the leadership positions occupied by women. This is improvement, but again, you have it as low as 14% in Rongo University. Another one, leadership position. The next one, again, considerations when hiring and appointing women for leadership positions. What do they consider? What the university management or whoever the governing board is, or the council, the university council is that employs these people or promotes them? Which one do we use? What the highest item they consider? The ones considered, the items considered are on the left. All right. Now the highest one, the one most considered is qualified in terms of experience. Fine, that is for both men and women. You only look at them in terms of qualified for men and women. Next one is potential leadership qualities. I believe this should be broken down in a bit more detail. All right, you want to go back to the, yeah, okay. So this goes on to 71% right through to 14%. All right, they look at different education. Effective manager, for example, 57% of the time we look at this particular attribute, this particular quality or characteristic to in appointing them. Again, the same with upward mobility, etc., etc. Reward for hard work, expert in community relations, 14%. Reward for hard work is only 29%. That is not just. All right, they do hard work. We don't consider the hard work they do when appointing them. All right. Anyway, this is just a preliminary results, so we won't read too much into them until the analysis are complete. Next slide, please. In light of this, there are mechanisms proposed for ensuring to ensure gender equity and equality in this, and they are right there on the screen. And maybe difficult to read for some of you, but with my 4 eyes, I can read them. From implementing affirmative action for some leadership positions, affirmative action is there, right through to applying a rotational approach to top positions. I believe some universities do, in the Western world, do rotation. At the level of dean of education faculty, for example, it will rotate among particular category of staff, academics. Okay, so let's go to South Sudan. We have a few more to go. South Sudan, again, here also, next slide, the next 2 slides. Next slide. Here too, the policy and legal frameworks are there, quite a number of them, not as many as in Kenya, but they're still there, addressing, looking at women and addressing the issue of gender parity or gender imbalance, all right? So few universities, about public universities here, about 5 of them were part of the study. And then of course we have the private universities, quite many more of them distributed around the country of South Sudan, from Juba to Wow, Malakal, etc., etc. But coming to the crux of what we want, move 2 more slides, please. Forward 2 more slides. Next slide. Next slide. Forward. Forward. Yeah, good. So gender diversity in university leadership positions. Again, here we have university councils, all the different positions on the left, and then of course the male female across the columns. Number of females you can see in the brown column, and the next column is the number of males in blue. You can see the disparity is right there. It's evident in terms of percentages, 90-something% difference. For example, university appointments board to the board. There's only 1 woman and 13 men. And it just goes on. This is a picture, again, in all the levels, men are the ones that dominate in occupying these leadership positions highlighted on the left. So this concludes for South Sudan. We go to Uganda. Uganda, again, they have a lot of other policy and legal frameworks which are supporting the further participation of women overall in spheres of life, including higher education, but other spheres of life, heading for gender equality, gender parity would be. And these include policies in higher education, affirmative action, policy in governance of higher education. The 1990, we are in 2022. That will be at least 12 years, 90, 2000, 2020. That's a lot of many years, that's about almost 30 years. But we still have a situation the same as before. This is a constitution that covers that. There are other university tertiary institution acts that cover all that. Then the policy at national level, Equal Opportunities Act 2007. These are all legal frameworks that creates the environment that should create the environment to be able, higher education institution, for example, to be able to ensure that women participation in leadership positions in higher education increases. These are legal frameworks. There, a lot of them are there. What is the problem then? Okay, but before we look at what is the problem, let's look at what is the situation continuing into the country after this. What is the gender scenario, if you like, in Ugandan universities? We have a similar setup. We have the professors and the positions, upper level positions, academic positions really, from lecturer, assistant lecturer, right to professor. That's the academic path. And again, you will see the imbalance is still there. It still persists. If you look at, for example, position of senior lecturers, right, in universities in Uganda, that's between 2004 and 2020. That's a couple of years, 2 years ago. Or at Makerere University, for example, you have these. You have senior lecturers. You have 36 female, and 153 female. Lecturers, you have 115 and 345 for male. All right, this is quite an imbalance. And then you have, of course, 244 professors. And then the higher you go, the less the women participate. You see, so as we are down 4,611 assistant lecturer, okay, but they start lecturers increase 145, 115, 345, it goes on. But senior lecturer, they go down 36 to 153 male, and then assistant professor, you have 4 females and 64 males. All right, professor, 2 females, 44 males. The imbalance, it becomes more and more acute as we go higher up. Something is responsible there, and we need to look at it and see what we can do. Okay, next, national analysis at Gulu University. Gulu University, again, the same position. Heads of department, deans, central management, senate, appointments, board, university council members. Again, the imbalance is there. So the picture is the same in the 3 countries, with slight improvements here and there in terms of absolute numbers. But when you come down to the percentages and look at them, really, they are still the same picture. The disadvantage, the imbalance is still there. Why institutions hired women for the leadership positions? Why higher education institutions appoint women for leadership positions. I believe we wanted to know what are they looking for? Why do they hire them? All right. And in this case, the highest criteria is best qualified for position in terms of experience. This is one of the top attributes. 75% is because they're best qualified for position in terms of experience. Then the second attribute, right, is potential leadership qualities. All right, the chances of this particular lady to be able to lead the teams are considered. Best qualified for position in terms of formal preparation, 42%. Effective manager, 42%. Whether the lady is effective manager or not, in any case, 42% of the is when institutions hire women, 42% of them would be looking at effective manager position. Affirmative action goes on until reward for hard work. Reward for hard work is 17%. And I think this is not fair. This is definitely not fair. I will say it quite now, my friend. We cannot go along with this kind of reward for hard work should be high, should be equal to men. You see, reward for hard work should be considered in appointing them as as higher up the higher up there rather than further down being the last attribute they consider. Now, given the situation in these three countries with regards to women in higher education leadership positions, all right, there are some strategies that are proposed to increase women participation in higher education, right? And these are preliminary recommendations are these, of course, subject to further refining based on the further analysis of the report, and this would have done already for presentation at the higher education conference. And I think one of them, there were 2, 4, 6 items here. The first one is to orientation to the institutional policies, procedures, guidelines, and job descriptions of the senior leadership positions. We need to orient these positions, all right? The procedures and everything that relates to these positions need to be made available and known to everybody, including the female ones. It's why targeting the female employees of the university. Undertake a candid assessment of the efficacy of the existing HEI's policies. Now, these are HEIs as well as ministry policies, because the HEIs they have a parent ministry. Higher education has a parent ministry, either the Ministry of Higher Education or the Ministry of Education, comprising all the levels of education. In either case, we need to look at the policies and the even the legal frameworks that we have put in place, look at them and see how they are performing. Are they performing well? Are they doing what we want them to do? Clearly, it seems to me, given the results of these studies in the universities highlighted just now, it looks like it is not functioning yet. So we need to assess a candid, I like the word candid there, candid assessment of the efficacy of the existing HEI policies. Let's look at them, see how we can modify them for them to be more effective. The third one, conducting gender awareness campaigns among different stakeholders. This is good. If the stakeholders here, we're looking at not only the women groups as such, but even university professors, the university governing board, the Ministry of Education, the higher education councils, association of universities, to talk to them, sensitize them about the importance of gender parity in the universities. What we are losing, I think those campaigns, those awareness campaigns should also be focusing on what we are losing, not be able to use 50% of our women. The fourth one is the nurturing a gender-responsive organizational environment that allows women to thrive in leadership. I think Prof. Gijzen has mentioned in the earlier, I think, it's Prof. Gijzen who mentioned that women, even in university places, they have to take off time for child rearing or looking after children or family. They will take time, and this counts against them, counts against their research outputs, for instance, all right, counts against maybe their presence in the class, in the lecture room, let's say lecture room in this case. So we have to look at, the question will be, is the university environment, organizational environment, is it gender responsive enough to allow women to thrive? We need to look at that as well, because that is what we have to have. So to have an effective one, which we recommend, and what we need to do about the organizational environment, which will allow women to thrive, we will need to look at that situation and then see what we can do there. The other one is developing and implementing gender-inclusive policies for leadership in higher education. Fine. This is also very important and it's related to the preceding one. And I think everybody has to be included. In this case, we are looking at gender. The two genders are male, female, and these are the ones mainly we are talking about how they fit into the universities and how they occupy different positions. And of course, the last one here, which has a lot of other things on, I believe, is implementing affirmative actions. Affirmative actions are designed for a reason. The example of Rwanda has been evoked by Prof. Gijzen, and Daniele has mentioned that as well. It is true. They are one of the countries that have so far achieved gender parity in almost everything. All right. So I must say, sorry, I'm Gambian. I must say that for Gambia in the schools, enrollment, girls now actually are above boys. You know, so sorry, I must say this, but overall, gender parity is important, and affirmative actions, if we implement them properly, effectively, we will be able to see improvements in the women participation in the higher education levels. I think I'll stop here. These are just recommendations, preliminary as indicated, but the full report, the final report also will be ready, inshallah, for presentation at the World Higher Education Conference in Spain in May. That's a few months away, but we can do that. And I think this is the slide that reminded me of that. And I would like to thank you all very much for now, so that we can have maybe questions, or etc., etc. We have, by the way, before I just say thank you, we have the eminent professors who undertook the consultancy work, the research work at the 3 countries. I think our colleague Awol, who was the point person for this exercise at the level of Nairobi here, I think has mentioned to them that they could be joining this meeting, and there could be a question or two where they may need to clarify anything else in the event the question is a bit above our heads. So anyway, thank you all very much for this, and thank you for your attention. And over to you. Is it Sara?
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks to you, Professor Saidou. Thanks for your presentation, and also to Daniele for her presentation. Next on the agenda, we have a guest speaker. We have Professor Winnie Mitula. She's a research professor and UNESCO Unit Wing Chair. She teaches at the Institute for Development Studies at the University of Nairobi. So let's welcome Professor Mitula to this session. Over to you, Professor Mitula.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I want to begin by apologizing. Our Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Associate Vice Chancellor, was supposed to be in this forum, but unfortunately she got held up. And I think I also have my colleague, Alice Odingo. I can't see her on the platform, but if she's there, she should at least have a voice right now. Alice, are you there? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad that, yes, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Alice? Good, yes. Yeah. So I want to call upon Alice, because Alice was appointed to represent the Associate Vice Chancellor, because she is the chair of gender mainstreaming at the university, and a lot of things that have been said resonate well with her. So at least she can give a bit of response and represent the VC, the Deputy VC accordingly. Alice, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the Director, UNESCO, and the team for organizing this important pre-launch activity and also the survey. I am here representing the Associate Vice Chancellor, Professor Margaret Chesang Hutchinson, who was not able to attend this. And I'm privileged to be here and also to listen to these key comments about gender issues at the higher education institutes. And I would just like to take you through the speech that I was given by the Associate Vice Chancellor without taking a lot of time. Yes, there was recognition that women have been marginalized over the years in education, and this has got historical background from colonial times due to many issues like cultural and socioeconomic drawbacks. And also during that time, most women are given marginal subjects like domestic science, nutrition, and education. And that made them lag a little bit behind. And also the pioneer women who began advancing in higher education, they began in late 1970s, so late 1960s and early 1970s. And from there, women actually have tried to climb the ladder. I can see the statistics we have are very key in telling us the leaking pipe, but I hope with time, when you implement these good policies we are talking about, then the women will be able to close those leakages. Yes, the presence of women in higher education is directly linked to other levels of education and women's overall participation in development. And it has been shown through research that a number of women reduces as education level progresses. This has been seen in Kenya and also many other African countries. And also we have seen that at the lower levels, there are more women, for example, at the diploma level. And as they move to degree levels, as you have been told, then the numbers decrease. And we have seen that at the university level, there was increased government-sponsored students in 2018-2019, which moved from 22,731 to 39,702 in 2020-2021, which was remarkable improvement. And we still hope that that will continue to improve so that many women can be able to access higher education during their time. So a number of shortfalls have been seen to be sometimes linked to this leaking pipe we are talking about. And one of them include the lack of finances at household level, as many families prefer to sponsor the boys compared to girls due to their financial constraints. Also, there are certain practices that today have been outlawed, like female genital mutilation, which still take place in certain communities. And also, women go through menses, a link to poverty can inhibit them from studying, apart from teenage and youth pregnancy and other maternal responsibilities. So all these things contribute to women's low participation or low numbers at higher levels of learning. So I think we have been given a number of policies and legislation that have been used to try to regulate these gender gaps. And I think they are working. Even in Kenya, we have a number of them, like the Kenya Constitution, which advocates for equality, and we had Vision 2030, and all our medium-term plans all target equality and equity. And also toward that, we have the National Gender Policy on Gender and Development, 2019, and here we have acknowledged all the gains we have made. And besides those external policies, at the University of Nairobi, we have University Act 2012, which provides for gender balance and equality among students and employees and also in all appointments at the university. So these ones help us to guide even as we try to implement affirmative action, although not properly done, but we're in the process of doing that. When you look at the gender status at the leadership and governance level, we still have deficit, and we have more males in leadership and governance level. And for example, in Kenya, out of the 32 public universities, only 6 have female vice chancellors. So that's also a low number, but we hope that will improve. And they also have gender policies, and majority of them actually try to meet the 2/3 gender rule. So a number of challenges have been identified that contribute to these lower female numbers at higher education institutions. The first one is financial and institutional constraints. There are also limited investment in higher education. So sometimes also the higher education loans board that helps to fund students do not support all the needy students, and that means a number of them are left out. There are also requirements for length of service and research grant contribution as part of promotion at the university level. And some of the issues could be linked to women themselves, for example, not being able to be aggressive enough to seek positions of responsibility, and maybe because of their own self-deficiency. And then sometimes there's also admission skill gap that leave women behind. And we say that sometimes it is because they are shy, as the same male colleagues who have the same qualifications still are able to access those positions of power. So in a try to address these challenges and to include more women, we may need innovative funding strategies which are easily accessible to enable us to have data for planning and interventions, and also design gender equity-based scholarships and grants for women. We may also need endowment fund for women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We have mentioned here the importance of having a conducive, gender-responsive environment that supports women. That is also key in trying to address the challenges that hold women behind. And then also regular monitoring and evaluation for informed policy and program interventions. Again, I would like to sincerely congratulate UNESCO for this important step, because it's going to contribute towards improvement in higher education, not only in Africa, but other parts of the world. And therefore, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Professor Alice Odingo, for your words. And now I would like to welcome our colleague Awol Endris, Program Specialist in Education at the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa in Nairobi, who will moderate the questions and exchange session of this event. Awol, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you very much, colleagues, for taking time to be here to this very important pre-launch event. We have a couple of questions, and the questions can be answered by the two presenters, and also we have among us the three researchers, Professor Benan Basheka from Uganda, Professor Winnie Mitula from Kenya, and Professor Sibrino Forajala from South Sudan among us here. And maybe we will also provide them the opportunity to respond to some of the questions. Now, I will start with the first question that was presented to us by colleague. It's given to us in Spanish, and perhaps if the question is posed in English and the answer is given in English, my colleague Sara has offered to translate that into English. So Sara, if you can read out that question and then translate that into English. And we ask either the two presenters or one of the three researchers to respond to that.
Yes. Let me, I have the question here. Hold on just a moment. Okay, I'm going to read it first in Spanish and then in English. La mujer siempre ha sufrido violencia laboral, física, psicológica, pero no se atreve a denunciar por temor a las represalias. ¿Qué hace falta? Now in English. Women have always suffered physical and psychological violence at work, but do not dare to report it because of reprisals. What is needed?
Thank you very much, Sara. And I would want to ask Daniele to respond to this question. You may want to do it in Spanish for the benefit of the person asked the question, and then Sara will translate, or whichever way you think is fit.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Sara, for the translation. I can see the question here. I have the chat open here. Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question. We have not covered that in the report in terms of harassment actions that often occur in all education levels, including higher education. But I think the fact that we have, for example, mentioned that we need more policies to support women in all the aspects in their participation in higher education. It's not only in leadership, it's not only in enrollment, but in all the aspects. Policies to protect, policies to help women access these spaces, but also to protect them and keep them in those spaces. I think this is one of the maybe possibilities that we can find to support those women, because I can see here in the question is in Spanish, but the person is asking what is missing, right? Women suffer physical violence, psychological violence, and they do not feel comfortable to, it's in Spanish, I'm doing a fast translation. They don't feel comfortable to say that they are suffering those situations. I feel that policies that support women, right, an environment that support women, they give them support for them to say what are the situations they're going through, might be an idea in that regard. But just, I cannot see the name of the person who did the question, who posed the question, but we did not cover that in this study specifically. So as this study is more directly towards Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda, I don't feel comfortable to say, oh, these are the actions that those countries should do, right? Because it was not the intention to cover that. But I think we need, if I can answer in general terms, a more political policy environment that protect women, right? It's not only to support them in terms of enrollment, in terms of supporting their careers, but also help them when they come through those situations. I think this is what I could say for now. I don't know if Dr. Saidou would like to add anything. You are muted. You are muted.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Yes, I agree with you very well, Danielle, in the sense that it wasn't one of the work streams that we had in the study. But as you also rightly said, there are policies that are designed, I'm sure, in all these countries for protecting ladies or women in the workplace or elsewhere in society. I know for a certain that UNESCO is working at the programmatic level, is working on education for health and well-being. This well-being looks at all of those, from teenage pregnancies and all of these harassment, gender-based violence, etc., right through from school, bullying, etc. These are all things that have a bearing on protection, and these are separate, complete. Well, not separate. They are targeting a different set of people, as opposed to the ones that this study is focusing on in this case. But it's quite an important question, because gender-based violence is extremely, extremely important thing to discuss and address and put a stop to it right away. Okay, over to you, Awol.
Right, thank you very much. perhaps in the interest of time, I know the issues are very pertinent and more could be said on them, but in the interest of time and to also make sure the questions asked by our audience are treated, I'll now read the second question and perhaps ask the researchers. We may begin with Professor Basheka and ask him to comment on this. The question is, what do you mean by formal preparation as a consideration to hire women for leadership positions? In the study, it was mentioned that formal preparation for women to be assuming leadership position is mentioned, and perhaps the colleague who asked this wants a little more clarification on this. Can I ask Professor Basheka if you can comment on this?
Yeah, thank you, Awol, and the person who asked the question. Now, increasingly in any organization, you will find that there are formal and informal processes through which us who are in leadership positions prepare our successors. It is about succession planning. For example, if I am in my current position and I'm supervising all the deans and directors of academic units, I know that I have served, for example, for 5 years. It is upon me to formally start a process of succession planning and know maybe after my term that someone should be able to take over. So I think it was where it was mentioned that was in reference to that formal process of enabling women take leadership positions. You will notice that all managerial positions are time-based, where people serve 5 years or 10 years in office. But to the surprise in many of our institutions, after the period, you find someone, for example, is leaving next month from an office, and there is no formal process of handing over. The person has not identified a successor. So it was in reference to that formal process, knowing that all of us are in offices, but we are only there for a specific period, and therefore they need to initiate processes formally within the existing policies and regulations to ensure that we have people taking over from us, and particularly in this regard, ensuring that women are prepared to take leadership positions. And that formal process starts from the academic side, because most of the leadership positions in universities require, for example, someone to be a professor. To be a vice chancellor, someone has to be a professor. So the formal process of doing so starts at the departmental level, and then through the promotion to maybe senior lecturer, associate professor, to the professor position, but also an element of leadership, because someone must have experience as a head of department, maybe as a dean or a director, and so on.
I have a follow-up
very much.
Awol,
yes.
I have a follow-up question quickly for the prof. It's a simple one, really, but I just wanted to confirm. Can I go?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Prof, thank you very much for your response. It was very clear. I was just wondering whether this formal process is actually formalized and expected of people who are going to retire, people who are going to who are heading a particular department or group of people to really practice this. Make sure that you at some particular point, at sufficient time, you identify the person among the people you think the best suited to lead, with all the criteria and so on. I think is it formalized in the university rules and procedures? Over to you.
Yes, I think should be formalized in the university procedures, okay, and based on some level of merit and criteria. Take an example in 2 institutions in our countries. One is the church. And then the second one is, for example, the judiciary. Within the judiciary, for example, it is known on who qualifies to be, for example, in the Court of Appeal and in the Supreme Court. And it is from that cadre of people who are prepared formally that will take over, for example, the position of the Chief Justice when he or she retires. In the church, whether Catholic or Protestant, it is known, for example, who should be a bishop, who should be an archbishop, and it is known. So why can't it be done within the universities? That is my proposal.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think it should be formalized. If it's not, where it is not, it should be formalized and inscribed in the regulations of the university that staff is expected, leader is expected to abide by these principles, by these criteria. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. Thanks a lot. Over to you, Awol.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues, once again. I have a question now. I don't know if the person who posed the question, Ms. Lynette Kisaka, would have the opportunity to explain it further, but I'll read the question as is. Thank you for the research results. Is there a link between the size of the university in terms of the total number of full-time academic staff and women participation? It's likely that a university with a high percentage may have just a handful of women, while those with low percentages have hundreds of women in senior lecture positions. For comparison, it says show both examples 650, 70% or 1151%, as is the case in some slides. If the question is clear enough, I would want Professor Cibrino to comment on this, if it's okay, huh? Professor Cibrino, I think this is, you've done the work in South Sudan, and in South Sudan, enrollment number and also the number of staff in universities have a very big difference. And therefore, maybe you may want to comment on this aspect of higher education staff profile would affect the positioning of women in leadership positions. Professor Cibrino.
Did he hear you?
Professor Cibrino, can you?
Okay, if he's
if you can get closer to the mic, you're very weak, but we can hear you okay.
Okay, all right. Can you hear me now?
Professor Cibrino, you now unmute yourself. I see your name here. Yes, I see two names for Professor Cibrino. Yes.
Unmuted. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. In South Sudan, of course, when we started, things were organized. We had the National Council for Higher Education, and it met quite frequently to decide on issues of this nature. Unfortunately, because of the conflicts of 2013 and its repeat in 2016, in fact, the National Council has not met for quite a long time, up to date.
Okay.
And therefore, the sizes of the universities have not really been based on some clear regulations. Those university vice chancellors who felt that they needed to increase the numbers of enrollment of students into their institutions, there was a time they could do so without reference to even to the Ministry of Higher Education, unfortunately. So the ideal thing, of course, would be that there should be regulations, and these regulations have to be approved by the National Council for Higher Education, and of course, later, the Chancellor of the universities. That would be the format. But we haven't reached that stage. And as a result, the appointment of women in higher positions in the universities which actually are based on deputy vice chancellors. We had one single vice chancellor, but this person met with a lot of resistance because, you know, we are at a stage where male always think that they are a possibility. They would be the one in control and not women. But with this new development, we hope that people will begin to open up and that the National Council for Higher Education would come into play its role so that universities are organized in a systematic way, both public universities as well as private, because all of them are producing qualified people for the same country. So there is a lot of catching up to do. You know, those of us who keep very close attention to how universities should function and how people should be selected, how long, for instance, a head of a department can stay or a dean of a college and so on, we get a lot of frustration because things are not done in the way we think should be. But our hope is that in the future, things will open up and people will begin to work according to rules and regulations, which applies to everybody. I think that's what I can say at this moment. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Cibrino. You have shared your experience in South Sudan, and I'm sure we can draw parallels from other countries as well. But again, in the interest of time, I would like to pose the last question we have, and I want Professor Mutula to respond to this, and the presenters, Daniele and Saidou, may add on to this also. Now, one of the recommendations to advance women to leadership positions in universities is some form of an affirmative action. Okay, now how do you look at an affirmative action to promote women to leadership positions vis-a-vis the quality issue? You know, some people don't like this word affirmative action because it sounds like it is a preferential treatment and maybe quality may suffer, that kind of arguments. What's your position now, Professor Mutula, and maybe the position of your institute also in reconciling the need for affirmative action and ensuring quality in assigning women to leadership positions? Over.
Thank you very much, Awol. I always say that affirmative action is a bridging, it's just a bridging, you know, platform. If universities did the right thing, there would be no need for affirmative action. And that's why one would argue that you really need to keep monitoring, evaluating, and learning so that you are able to know where are you. You know, this is individual, should be individualized. Each university should be able to know where they are. If you have gotten your 50% or whatever, probably you will then work up to sustain that. But at the beginning, if it's so skewed, then there is just no option. There has to be an affirmative action. Universities have to come up with affirmative action so that they bridge the gap. The moment the gap is bridged, then you don't need to pull ropes again about action. And of course, there are many ways that women can be supported, because we know very well, like we heard in the presentation about, you know, this losing women along the line. You look at how many are doing research, there are fewer doing research. You look at how many are professors, there are fewer professors, and there are more at the bottom. There has to be a reason. If they were all able to come on board and they're not getting up, that basically means that something is happening. And that is basically the load and the kind of, you know, when you, for example, when you take leave, a very typical example, when a woman takes leave, and it's not just the 3 months leave or 4, I mean, after that leave, still you need a lot to back and forth with a child and all that. If we were to have good affirmative actions, we would have very friendly environments in universities. We should have in universities facilities that can take kids so that having a child does not, block you from upward mobility. And it's quite something. Look at research. Research is so strenuous. It requires you working in the evening, you are working in the night, and you are working weekend and all that. So when you look at all those stresses, if we really want to do affirmative action, it's not just a matter of providing that affirmative action and not accompanying it with practical support that help those particular women who are in stress to be able to levelize so that they're able to move up the ladder. So I want to stop there, but I know the debate on affirmative action can be sometimes very abrasive, but let's see it as just bridging the gap. And we are not doing a right thing if we've not bridged the gap. So any university who has so low numbers of women has a problem. So if you have a problem, you have to do something about it. And that is the affirmative action. The moment you do it right, you have no business with affirmative action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Matula. Now we are done with the questions, and we have gone a little over the limit, about 8 minutes, but I think it's okay. It's in the nature of these online meetings and webinars that maybe we don't start exactly on time, or maybe it's a little over time, and I think that's tolerable. I would now then close this part or this segment of proceedings, and over to you, Sara.
Oh, thanks, Awol, for moderating the session of the Q&A session. And so I don't know if we are going to have conclusions, Professor, with Professor Saidou, before we say goodbye and end this session. Do you have any final words before we end? We can hear you. You're on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much, Sara. I think according to the program, there are just some very brief concluding remarks that were prepared for Prof. Gijzen, but he had asked me to read them on his behalf because he has, like I said earlier, he has an appointment with an ambassador at the embassy. So he was able to come at the beginning, but now he's already gone. So basically, the stuff we prepared here, things we had just discussed and talked about in the discussion and the presentations. But let me just formalize this by going through part of the speech. And I want to begin from the salutation so that we have on record who and who were here, and some of the colleagues mentioned in categories. For example, Professor Francesc Pedró, Director of the UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education in Latin America and the Caribbean; Professor Hubert Gijzen, Director of the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa; Professor Margaret Jesang Hutchison, Deputy Vice Chancellor, represented, I'm afraid I didn't get the name, I couldn't write it down, represented very ably by her colleague, representing the University of Nairobi, university faculty present, those who are already university professors or lecturers already present for this meeting, the UNESCO colleagues in headquarters. I hope they were able to join us. They were sent an invitation. The regional offices in Africa, we also invited all the 5 regions of Africa offices to join us, and of course the colleagues and UNESCO colleagues in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I must mention here, quite apart from the director, Francesc Pedró, who I knew quite a while, and I worked with him when he was in Paris and I was in Abuja. But I also mentioned Daniele. Daniele is a real asset to this exercise. This project, collaborative project, and I think Daniele and her team, I need to thank you all very much. I need to mention you in the salutations and come on record for the good work that you have been, a good collaboration that you have bring forward from Venezuela, Caracas, and sometimes from Brazil. But all the same, thank you very much. The researchers, of course, the eminent professors who are taking this study, both in Kenya, Professor Mutula, I remember you very well. I suppose you will remember me too, because we have met in many occasions, including the latest one. How you do? Latest one, I think, is in Naivasha a couple of weeks ago. And prior to that, we met at the university at the launch of the O3 project, along with Professor Gijzen. Okay, the researchers here and the other researchers in Uganda and South Sudan. I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with you, but I think from now on we'll continue. Since you know Awol, we are going to continue to work together to look at further mine this data that we have to see precisely what is the problem, what need we need to do. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning, afternoon, evening, and I think probably now is afternoon in Caracas. The rest of us is evening, almost evening here. We have been gathered in this online platform, online space for the last one and a half hours to hear the results of 3 studies on the participation of women in higher education, as is in these countries, Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda. And essentially, what we have seen is that gender imbalance in the representation of women in leadership positions in the 3 countries, higher education leadership positions in 3 countries, is still persistent. It's persistent and very stark. You can see the difference in participation levels. But I'm sure you will agree with me that this unfortunate situation is not limited to these 3 countries. For Africa, you go to West Africa, similarly, you have a similar situation. Go to Central Africa, it could be even worse. Here we have a situation there. Southern Africa, I'm sure the whole of continental Africa, it is Sub-Saharan Africa, it will be the same or similar, all right? As in other spheres of education, women are underrepresented in enrollment, in position of leadership, in higher education too. With all the policies, legal frameworks, and affirmative action initiative, the problem still persists. I think this is what also interests me. Why? What has happened? Are we not implementing the policies and all these actions, including affirmative actions, the right way or effectively, or are we not committed to it? Or is it something else? Okay, but the problem still persists despite decades of policy and legal frameworks, institution and everything, but we still have this. We need to work even harder now, I think, to change the situation, because it must be changed. As women participation in anything, including, especially in higher education, is very crucial in terms of achieving equity and equality of opportunities to everyone. These are things we have in documents everywhere, documentation, in declarations of the United Nations, of the World education operators, if you like, governments, everybody committed to SDG 4. SDG goals and SDG 4 talks about inclusive, equitable education and lifelong learning opportunities for all. This is underpinned by the principle or the mantra, leaving no one behind, which means we cannot leave anybody behind as a result of gender, geographical location, or sexual orientation, or any other thing. See, so the participation of these people is very, very important in terms of equity and equality. We cannot claim to have a system that gives equal opportunity to both men and women to assume leadership positions unless women are properly represented. We have to, when we have 50-50 or around that area, around that ratio, we can say, yes, we have systems that are gender responsive. We have systems that are healthy in terms of gender relations, etc., etc. Research has shown conclusively that women can bring a lot of difference in learner achievement, enrollment of girls in education, through serving as role models and mentors, among others. Right? Their contribution and influence will be maximized if they also serve as managers and professors of higher education institutions. As for this to happen, ministers of education and higher education institutions will have to put together mechanisms in place to encourage women to come forward and hold leadership positions. Now, we have said, okay, I just saw here without compromising quality, and I think this has been addressed already by just now by Professor Mitula with regards to affirmative action. It's a bridge, a temporary bridge to correct an imbalance, a situation, and then you can remove it. You don't talk about unity anymore, right? So I don't believe it will water down quality. We have to look at the institution, the academics. You want to have basics. You want to have the basic minimum, and probably on top of that you add before we can say, okay, now we will use affirmative action to hire this lady rather than this male for this higher position. There would be basic minimum academic criteria, experience, exposure to this and that, and part of the formal process is important. So quality business is not really to be worried about, as conditions are there and procedures are there to ensure that the only difference would be like, this is a woman and this is a man, but we prefer the man. But the difference between them is little, small. In that case, some organizations will go for the woman rather than for gender parity, gender equality business, to catch up on all those long historical disadvantages and things that will draw them down. To correct that, that's why we have affirmative action. That is why we are saying, in this interview, we have this male professor scoring 9 over 10. We have this female professor scoring 8 over 10. And we already have professors in front there. At the next level position, we have about almost all men, 80% men. So it makes sense to now take the 8 out of 10 woman professor to move her on to the other, so for affirmative action to correct the imbalance. All right, UNESCO works, or rather, let's look at the researchers. So the 3 researchers have identified the bottlenecks to the advancement of women in higher education, and have also suggested remedial actions. It will be good if these suggestions are taken up by the concerned management bodies of HEI institutions, and indeed the relevant ministers of education of the countries, or any country of the countries, to enable better representation of women in leadership positions. UNESCO works with member states, all countries, to support them in the areas of policy revision and programs development that help in design and renewal of education systems. If there is need for support to see how those systems can be readjusted to be more reflective of what you want to happen, technical capacity is there from UNESCO to ensure that the support is present. Higher education is one subsector of education that UNESCO has a sort of monopoly among the UN agencies. UNESCO is the only agency among the UN agencies that addresses higher education. For primary and etc., you have UNICEF here, you have ILO there with TVET, you have all these other ones trying here and there. But when it comes to higher education, it is UNESCO, right? So we are ready and available, and of course the institutes are there, just like the Institute Institute for Higher Education in Caracas, Venezuela. That's their job, higher education, And International Institute, they'll be working with all countries around the world. All right, they're just located in South America, in Latin America. Our office will continue to work closely, our office here, and of course UNESCO in general, with the countries it serves in the Eastern Africa region. And I'm sure my other colleagues in the other UNESCO regional offices and country offices will do the same. Together, we hope to bring a difference in the higher education space on the continent. One way of doing this is to encourage universities and higher education institutions to value the contribution of women, higher education leaders and managers. In conclusion, I commend the 3 researchers for the work, outstanding work that they have done in documenting the situation of women in higher education institutions in their respective countries, and for suggesting ways and means to promote them further. That is critical. These studies have served as the basis on which similar studies can be conducted to further mine the data with a view to seeking answers to key questions relating to women participation in higher education leadership. I also appreciate all of you present here for taking time to attend today's pre-launch event and contribute to the discussions. Now, this all of you, from our directors right down to everybody, our colleagues out there, the researchers, everybody, we appreciate your presence here. We believe that together we can improve women's participation in leadership positions in higher education institutions in Africa as a whole. This is what we believe this. That is why we agreed immediately to find out what are the things that are hindering women participation in leadership positions in the higher education space in Africa. Why? What are the factors that are inhibiting this thing? So we decided to come together, and thank God we are still together, and we'll continue together beyond May into looking at expanding the study to cover more countries, all right, and then maybe looking at deeper into the additional questions, look at deeper into the courses. As the discussion was going on, I had two things. One was shyness of ladies or women to aggressively pursue positions and come out and say this. Shyness should be put on the side. We should not be shy for anything. We want something, we have to go for it and not shy about it. But then women are not seen as aggressors, aggressive behavior. It's more the male gender that is normal, commonly known to be very aggressive and like that. But women are generally more are less aggressive, more conciliatory, more bringing people together, etc., which are all very good. But then we have to look at this shyness and aggression. You don't have to be very aggressive against your male counterpart, because we need both sexes to happen too much. We don't want to have also all women, no male. That's not balance either. We want a balance. All right, and in that we can work together and see how we correct the situation. Now, I think I will thank you all very much for listening. I believe this meeting has gone just over the 1.5 hours, but it's been a very worthwhile one. I appreciate sincerely all your presence, your contributions, the ideas you put forward, and I look forward to seeing you at the launch of this at the conference, World Higher Education Conference in I think Barcelona in May. I also extend our Professor Mutula extend our appreciation to the Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi. All right. It's a pity we didn't see him, but we just extend our appreciate the support that he's giving to the researchers to come into come to campus, collect information, data, and so on. Thank you all very much. And Daniele, do I close? Daniele.
Thanks, Daniel.
Okay.
Thanks.
So because I will pronounce the webinar closed, and then nobody can talk again. That's why I'm asking whether I should close it now.
We should take a final picture before we go with all the speakers, so all the people. So if you could please turn on your cameras to see you all, and we could have this last image before leaving. That would be great for thanking everybody for participating today, for joining us, and also we take the opportunity to remind the audience also that this recording will be available later on the UNESCO IESALC YouTube YouTube channel, and also people are asking for the presentations, so we shall be hanging the presentations up also on our website, and we should be sharing that information with you via email too. So it was a pleasure. Thanks for all of us for participating, for all of the people who attended this webinar as at the pre-launch of the report that is coming up in May. So thanks to you all, and have a nice day. And we in Caracas is early, Professor Jallow. Today is at 10 a.m. So this is our first event to celebrate International Women's Day. So we'll keep celebrating. We have many hours to go still.
Yes, indeed.
So thanks so much, and thanks to all of you for your wonderful insights and reflections, and for sharing the main ideas of this research. Thank you very much.
Good.
Now for the picture, please stay there. At the count of 3, please smile. So okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Let me see how it just worked. Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
everyone.
Neus.
Thank you,
And have a good
colleagues.
rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Okay,
so much.
Daniela, Sara,
Bye.
thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Profs, all the profs, Mitula,
Pedró.
thank you, and have a good evening. Good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Charles.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah. Thank you,
Okay,
Sara.
all right.
This is Awol.
Sara. So I
Bye.
think.
Bye-bye.
So, okay, the meeting, the seminar is declared closed. Now I can close it.